Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of 49ers Talk on Niners Radio 49. Today, our special guest on Niners Radio 49, really no introduction. He represents the 49er chapter in the UK. Lee Gowland, who just recently came out to the Bay Area more than 2 weeks ago. In fact, a week ago, finished his trip up in Seattle, where the Niners were winners on Thanksgiving night and was here when the Niners played the Bucks. So a little more than 10 days ago. So
Yeah.
Lee, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be on your show.
Niners Radio 49. Right now, it's 3 minutes past the top of the hour, 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So it's now 10 o'clock in the
That's correct.
UK.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
everybody getting ready to hit the hay back there for our good friends in the UK. So Lee, just I've seen your stories. I've just tell. I mean, before we go to that, how you became a 49er fan. How was your experience? We've met so many times over the years.
Yeah.
You came out to some of the Thanksgiving turkey bowls. Of course, my nephew Tyree Cross played on that championship team of 2019, right before
Yeah.
COVID, and then we saw you out here last year when Lincoln played on Turkey Day, and they ended up beating Balboa. They did beat Balboa again in the Turkey Bowl championship over last Thursday over at Keysar Stadium, which for a lot of Niner faithful, that's the original 49ers home, Keysar Stadium from 1946 till 1970 before they left the Haight-Ashbury Golden Gate Park area and headed southeast sector of San Francisco, where Candlestick Park was their home for the next for pretty much for the next 42 years from 1971 through 2013, which, by the way, this year marks the 10-year anniversary when the 49ers played their final season at Candlestick Park, which, of course, was the original home for the San Francisco Giants from 1960 till 1999. Yours truly was there for the final Giants baseball game at Candlestick back some 24 years ago. But Lee, let's talk about about that the recent you just came back from the Bay Area and checked out the Niners and Seahawks. I post some montage pictures of you guys on my tailgate show.
Yeah. So we had the chance to come over as a group. There's a section within Levi Stadium called the Gold Mine section. It's a fan chapter only section. So what you have to do as a fan chapter, you have to apply for which game you want to go to. And the Bucks game made the most sense for us. At the time when we applied for it, we hadn't realised it was salute to service. So it did come with some hurdles that we had to jump through to
Right.
actually get that game. And once we were selected to be in the fan chapter zone for that game, it was just a case of organising everybody, getting the numbers right. As it happens, we were slightly oversubscribed, so it fits a maximum of 40 people in there. We had 94 expressions of interest from the UK faithful all want to go over to the gold mine, and by the time it came to actually booking flights, booking hotel, that actually came down. So we ended up with 40, but we also had another 4 members who weren't part of the gold mine in the stadium in other seating. So we had 44 members in total at the Bucks game. So what the gold mine is, it's like a fan cheerleader-led zone. And it all came about because of the Auburn-Clemson championship game. I think it was
National
back in
championship,
2019.
right?
Yeah.
Which
And
Dwight Clark was a member. Used to once upon the late Dwight Clark played for Clemson before he
yeah,
headed out to the Bay. Played in that infamous. I think it was the Gator Bowl, late 1978. He was on that opposite when Clemson knocked out when they defeated Ohio State, where it was controversy when then the head coach, the legendary Woody Hayes, decked one of the Clemson players, and that was an ugly scene. After that game was concluded, they end up removing him as head coach immediately. There was some other thing, so that was something. But that's you've been coming out to Niner. How long you started becoming a 49er fan Tell us the story about that.
So I became a 49 fan in the late 70s, early 80s when I saw a 20-second clip on British TV, a British sports program called Transworld Sport. It was actually part of another program called World of Sport, and the
Wow.
Transworld Sport clip was maybe 5 minutes long, but the bit with the 49ers and Cowboys was literally 20 seconds. And I think the only reason they showed that particular game, because it was the only NFL game that they showed on that particular program, was because of the program Dallas. It was so popular in the UK, so they showed this clip of Dallas
Wow. Larry
Cowboys.
Hagman getting
Yeah,
so much,
that's
and
right.
Victoria Principal and
Yeah,
Patrick Duffy and Charlene Hilton getting mad reviews in the UK. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
In America, in the southwest of Texas, where that is all cowboy country. They are, by the way, there are a lot of 49er fans, and I follow a lot of my
There is,
followers
yeah.
there's a lot of Niner fans down there in the state of Texas in the southwest.
So it was purely because Dallas was so popular in the UK. So they showed this American football game. At the time, I didn't know what it was. It's the first time I'd ever seen it. My football team in the UK is Sunderland, who play in red and white, and because the 49ers were playing predominantly white but with red hoops on, and the wore gold helmet, I just thought that looked so cool. So that's how I became a 49ers fan. So ever since I saw that, I just thought the game looked incredible. So I tried to follow it, but it was never on TV in the UK. So I had to use Armed Forces Radio, which
Right.
is what the US Armed Forces use when they're over in Europe. And that always broadcast the games on late on a Sunday night for us. So you're talking anywhere between 6 o'clock at night and 4 o'clock the next morning. You'd be able to listen to a game broadcast. Obviously, it might not be the 49ers. It was whichever one they chose to broadcast live. So that's the one that we would have to listen to. It took another good 3-4 years before it started on British TV. I think it was 1984 that Channel 4 started a weekly roundup of the games.
Very
And
popular
the
in the mid
problem with
80s.
that, yeah, and the problem with that though is when we had our American football, when we got to watch the NFL, the games we were watching were already a week old. So we were getting the
Yeah,
highlights from the previous Sunday's games.
right. Right. And you
But
also
luckily
got to
enough,
remember there was no social media, no
that's right.
expanded cable,
Yeah,
and because doing in doing those years here in the U.S. the on Sundays, CBS had the NFC, the old National Football Conference rights. CBS had the rights to that. Uh, NBC had the rights to the AFC, known as the American Football Conference. In fact, go back before the 1970 league merger, you had CBS had the rights to the NFL. The 49ers was in the old guard with the Niners, the Rams, both the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons in the old NFC West came in the mid late '60s as expansion teams. Then you had the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings, and the Detroit Lions were divisional rivals, and then the Baltimore Colts was in that same coastal or with Cleveland and with the Browns and the Steelers, and then the NFC East you had Dallas, the the 19 they came into the league in 1960. You had the Redskins, you had the Giants, the Eagles, and then in the AFL you had like the Raiders, the Niners, the Raiders, the Chargers, the Jets, Dolphins came in later on, and then you had the Bengals, and NBC had the rights to the American Football League telecast, and then when the merger came, some of those teams like Cleveland and Pittsburgh moved into the new AFC American Football Conference, and they started a rivalry with Cincinnati and with Pittsburgh and Houston Oilers. NBC had the rights to the AFC, and CBS had the NFC. And then talk about the Super Bowl, it was like back in those years to about the early 80s, it was CBS doing the Super Bowl in the even number years. NBC did it in the odd number year after the regular season. And then ABC, of course, started doing Monday Night Football in 1970. They didn't do their first Super Bowl telecast rights to it till January of '85 when they played when, by the way, when the Niners defeated the Miami Dolphins in Super Bowl 19, which was yours first, truly. That was my first ever Super Bowl as a young 8-year-old. Because the Super Bowl 19 was played here in the Bay Area. San Francisco was
Yeah.
the host, but it was right down where you guys
The
were at
original Stanford Stadium. Yeah.
Stanford Stadium in Palo Alto, from where I live at right now. That's about a half hour, 25-minute, half hour drive. If you're taking the car, they beat the Dolphins and win their second Super Bowl. The Niners had the best record in football. Only the Dolphins, of course, they scored more points than any team. And remember, we were there last year in Fremont for that big event last year. We
Yeah.
both met, both Mark Clayton and Mark Duper, and plus Eric Wright and John Taylor. What was that
Yeah.
experience last year? We were there when we talked to you guys. So
Yeah. That was just crazy. So we hadn't arranged that. We found out about it the day before. So we'd already been in the Bay Area for a week. So we'd been to the Saints game the Sunday before, and then one of our friends was flying in from New Jersey, and he just happened to mention that John Chapman's 49 Rush road trip were having a pre-game party. Are we going to go? So we thought, well, yeah, let's go down. We might have a chance to meet a player. And once we got down there and got in, as soon as we got there, John turned around and says, look, come over here. I'm going to give you VIP passes to you and the party. So there was 5 of us.
and he's a
there, so we all
Dolphins
got
fan
VIP.
though too. He's a good guy though. He hooked and I said, and it was going through a cancer research, and I said, hey, I'll throw in 35. I'll sacrifice that $35 just to launch my platform. Like
Yeah,
in baseball, I'll trade that run in for an out just to have exclusive interview of 2 of Dan Marino's prime targets, both Mark Clayton and Mark Duper, who Dan Marino set the world on fire that year. 48 touchdown passes and threw for over 5,000 yards. That's a record. Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and others got a hold of a lot of Dan Marino's records in a
records.
single
Yeah,
season. But that was fun last year to see a lot of Niner Dolphin fans coming out, and that was just it was exciting. The Niners ended up winning that game at later that day. Which, by the way, they will play the Dolphins next year in South Florida. I may be maybe thinking about doing a trip down there, cover the Niners on the road next year down South Florida. Miami is another great city I like to take a visit down. But it was just fun. It was fun meeting
yeah.
2
So,
players I grew up with.
so once we got there, John Chapman, who's a 49ers fan, not a Dolphins fan,
Right,
he
John.
gave us the
Correction.
yeah.
The other
So
guy. He was a
yeah,
Dolphin
so
fan. He's the one set up. He
gave
did a
us
great job.
yeah, so he gave us the VIP passes, and as we walked in, Jed York happened to be there. So my friend Nicholas Parra from New Jersey, he made a beeline to Jed York and said, Jed, you need to meet this guy. This is El Presidente from the UK. So he introduced us. Nick had never ever met Jed, and it was his opportunity to talk to him, but he didn't. He actually introduced me to him and let me talk to him. So I was stood for a good 20 minutes talking to Jed York. Not just about the 49ers, but also about Leeds United, the fact that 49er Enterprises were investing in Leeds. And I mean, as we all know now, they've actually taken complete control of Leeds, 100%. So it was good to talk to Jed York. He was very amenable. He was very candid with all of his answers to the questions. Lovely guy to speak to. And then from then, we went in, met with John. And then later on in the night, we got to meet John Taylor and we got to meet Eric Wright as well. And both of those were unbelievable experiences. John Taylor, he was so excited to speak to us. He was like a little kid getting ready to tell you all these stories. And
Oh yeah.
it was so infectious, his happiness at getting to speak to us. And it was lovely to listen to him speak. And one of the things that I take away from speaking with John Taylor is the size of his hands. His hands were absolutely huge. They were like dustpan lids. I couldn't believe how big his hands are. And it's no wonder he was such a good receiver, having hands as big as that. Now, Eric Wright is a very humble person. He's a very thoughtful person. Every time you ask him a question, he has a good think about what the answer is going to be. And again, he was just so happy to speak to us. So both John Taylor and Eric Wright now have one of our UK flags. You can't actually see it behind us. I don't have it with us at the moment. But both of those went home that night with the UK flag. And Eric Wright was so moved by the fact that I'd actually turned up to give him something rather than asking him for something. He took my name and address and said, look, I've got to send you something. I don't know what it is, but I've got to send you something. As yet, I've not received anything, and I'm not holding out any hope. But it was the thought that counts. So that was a wonderful experience, and it kind of set up our game day for the next day, which is when we saw Brock Purdy for the first time. So I was lucky enough to be at the first game that Jimmy Garoppolo played. That was when he came in for CJ Beathard in the last, I think it was 1 minute 12 on the clock, back in 2017 against the Seahawks. He threw that touchdown pass to Robinson, I think it was, Aaron Robinson, in the end zone. That was his first touchdown pass. And I was actually there for his very last game as well, as a 49er, because he ended up breaking his ankle breaking his foot against the Dolphins. So I was there for his first and his last game. I was there for Brock Purdy's first game. Not only was I there for Brock Purdy's first game, I was actually at the draft when Brock Purdy was drafted.
The
as
last man standing. It's funny,
Last man
ironically,
standing.
when Brock Purdy made his first start against the Dolphins, a legend sitting there, Hall of Famer, I think is the greatest quarterback not to win a Super Bowl. Dan Marino was
Yeah,
sitting
Dan
there
Marino.
wearing that, and he had to be proud of that young kid Purdy wearing that 13. Because I mean,
And
like
that's
I
why he wears
said,
it.
my first Super Bowl I watched as an 8-year-old when the Niners dismantled Don Shula's Miami Dolphins, 38-16 at Stanford Stadium, and when they carried Bill Walsh on the field, that victory ride, I was just slowly
Yeah.
I begin to realize when you carry a coach like that off the field, and they talk about the Niners winning the Super Bowl, and this is me kind of, comprehending as an 8-year-old, you knew this was a big thing. When you win a Super Bowl in your hometown at Stanford as an 8-year-old, this was like, I wasn't really quite what much of football because of all that hitting, but I liked that red and the pants, and I said, hey,
Yeah.
next year, I mean, I may not never play football, but I have to watch this next year because this was some real stuff. And it didn't happen again for the next few years because they had those 3 playoff defeats, including '86, where yours truly one time in school, I was in the fourth grade back in 1986. I was 9 going on 10. Fall of '86, Joe Montana had that back surgery, and his career was a lot of uncertainty with the quarterbacks if Montana would ever come back from that serious back surgery. We wrote get well cards for him when he had his back surgery. That was our class assignment. We wrote get well cards for Joe Montana, and then the people, I think it was I'm trying to think, I think it was Jerry Walker, who was the PR director, sent us a picture of Joe Montana, and he already like pre-autographed it, like in the white signature. You know, we got those back in return. I put that thing on my wall in my room, and I'll
So
never forget that.
it's interesting that you mentioned Joe Montana then. So on the way over to the Bay Area 2 weeks ago, it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow actually. I watched a documentary about John Elway, and during that documentary they actually mentioned Joe Montana and the fact that the season after we won the Super Bowl, Joe had a pretty poor season that season, and in the off season, Bill Walsh actually reached out to several different teams to try and trade him because he wanted to get the draft picks to trade up and take John Elway. And I didn't know that. So I only found that out a fortnight ago, and I was absolutely gobsmacked about that. Luckily enough for us, the other teams also thought the same as Bill. Because he'd had such a down year the year after we'd played the Super Bowl, we'd won the Super Bowl, they thought he might be a flash in the pan, so nobody would give Bill the draft picks that he wanted. So he ended up staying a Niner, and the rest is history. He's a legend, and it worked out well for us.
Right. Because then Steve Young, Jeff Kemp, who did play well through most of that '86 season, only for him to get injured. Then you bring in Cal UC Davis, Mike Morosky filled in, didn't do that bad with them, and then Montana came back. And then after that '86 season, after that annihilation when Montana got knocked out at Giant Stadium, I was sick to my stomach when he got carried off on that stretcher at Giant Stadium. And, I mean, like, and then they end up bringing in Steve Young from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think was the best thing that happened. And then,
Yeah.
unfortunately, they lost the third straight year in the playoff to the underdog Vikings, where the Niners in '87 was clearly the best team in football, record wise, top ranked offense and defense statistically. Lose to the Vikings at Candlestick in that soggy field Candlestick, and then many people say that was Bill Walsh's low point, losing that to the Vikings because he almost ended up got bounced by Eddie DeBarlo. But then Montana may perhaps played his worst game in the postseason game. They bring in Steve Young, and they got back and made the game respectable, but they were really never in it. But that was the start of that. The first of what would be a quarterback controversy going into that offseason, heading into that 8-8 season, which they struggled all through almost inconsistently. In that 6-5, looked like the Niners were not going to even make the playoffs at all, be heading home for the holidays, and then they got together with the Monday night game against the Redskins. I'll never forget, against the defending Super Bowl champion Washington Redskins, and by another Hall of Fame legend, Joe Gibbs. John Taylor's 95-yard punt return, but still, I think still the longest punt return for a touchdown in franchise history. That turned it around for the 49ers, and they won 4 of their last 5 games. They beat the Vikings in the revenge. Then they beat the Bears, and they beat the Bengals. And I consider my favorite Super Bowl of the 80s, Montana, the drive, the John Taylor.
Yeah. Yeah. That was certainly a good drive. I was actually watching that tonight, believe it or not. And it is. I mean, it's timeless. It's timeless. So you mentioned about having a down game, having a bad game, and again, it's something that kind of it shows you how much pressure that quarterbacks are under these days, and it's purely because of social media. Because fans will just go straight into social media. If they have 2-3 interceptions, well, that's it. We need to get rid of him. He's garbage. People seem to forget that in the 1981 NFC Championship game, Joe Montana threw 3 interceptions. And you just couldn't imagine people trying to call for Joe Montana's head after he led us to the Super Bowl.
Niners had 6 turnovers, or they were 6 turnovers minus 6 in that turnover or that giveaway takeaway ratio. But it doesn't even matter because the Niners won. They beat Dallas and they ended up winning their first Super Bowl. So that's what was. That's what mattered. And then as long as you get that W, I don't care if he threw if they were minus 10 in that game, as long as you come out of there and survive that W, that's what matters. But
yeah,
and then my favorite, I still say, my favorite Niner team, the '89 team. Bill Walsh now retired. George Seifert comes in. They pick up where they left off. They go 14-2. And I was watching a little this Niner Eagle game when Montana had that fourth quarter comeback throwing for 4 touchdown passes in Philadelphia, which we will talk about the Niners and Eagles,
which we won 38-28.
That game, I think the 2 games I liked of that '89 season was that game in Philadelphia to come back, and then the John Taylor 2 90-plus yard strikes on Monday Night Football against the Rams down at Anaheim that give the Niners that win, to win the NFC West, get home field advantage. Then they just dominated the playoffs over the Vikings, the Rams, and the Broncos. And another tidbit, Ronnie Lott came to our church like a month after they put that in February 1990. I was now 13. Ronnie Lott came and visited us after our church service and talked about that season, about the harmony of the unity they had. I'll never forget that. My favorite defensive player, Ronnie Lott, he was the quarterback of that defense. And I was talking to Brian Mitchell, the former Philadelphia Eagles special teams. I told him Brian Dawkins was to the Eagles secondary what Ronnie Lott was to the Niners defense when they both were in their prime. And they talked about that '89 season and the possibility of going for that three-peat. But what was true? And then '94 was special because the Niners won the Super Bowl the year I graduated high school, January of 1985, when they beat the Chargers, and they beat the dreaded Dallas Cowboys to do it the year I was a senior in high school. That was 90. I always say 88, 89, because that was my childhood. I was in junior high, middle school, 6th and 7th grade. But then when they won the fifth Super Bowl, my senior year, when Steve Young was quarterback and they had Jerry Rice, they still had players from the leftover from when Bill Walsh was there, and then you had the new guys like Ricky Waters and William Floyd and Deion Sanders and Timmy McDonald, Merton Hanks, and Ken Norton Jr. coming from the dreaded Cowboys. That was very special. From the time I was 8 till I was about 18 years old. That 10-year window for me was so special, so special. And you think it's going to happen every year. But then the business of football started to change around that time in the mid-90s with the salary cap. You
Yeah.
couldn't keep a lot of these players. Ricky Waters, they weren't able to keep him. He goes to Philadelphia. Dion ended up going to the Cowboys, and they win their third Super Bowl in 4 years to cement themselves in the team of the 90s. But you could see the balance of power shifted from Niners, Cowboys to now Niners and Packers with the new Thorne, Brett Favre, and Mike Holmgren, who was an assistant with Bill Walsh, the West Coast offense. And the Packers had the Niners way in the late 90s, and then T.O. and the catch. And then the Niners did have the salary cap issues, though, and it was starting to catch up. And I look back in perspective, they kept some of those players little way too long. And when you do that, and when they're off the roster, it's that dead money is a big killer, is a big
Yeah.
stinker. That dead money is like you put you in like bad credit card debt will set a team back. And Bill Walsh came back as a acting general manager. And he had to part ways with a lot of these veteran players because it was different when you had a Fred Dean or a Wendell Tyler or a Keith Von Horst or a Randy Cross or Dwight Clark when their time was up. Their time was up. But was real when you're dealing with the salary cap and how much you could spend. And you know, but also, but you have to give credit to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan how they're managing this cap, and
Yeah.
but now we want to get to the present, start previewing the Niners and Eagles. This is in the in the '80s. It was the Niners, New York Giants, Niners and Bears with Mike Ditka, Giants and Niners with against Lawrence Taylor, Bill Parcells, Niners and Redskins, Joe Gibbs and Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, and Mark Rippon in the early '90s. The Niners and Cowboys with Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer, Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, the playmaker Michael Irvin, those and Alvin Harper, and then it was the Niners and Packer rivalry with Brett Favre, and then turned into the new century. It's in the 21st century. It was between that after 2002 was some lean years for the 49ers until Harbaugh
Yeah.
got
Quite a
there.
few lean years.
Niners and Seahawks, and then
Yeah.
now they have the Niners and Rams back in L.A. That revival of the true California rivalry, and now that brings us to here with the Niners and Eagles. Do you think this could be becoming a rivalry between coast to coast? These two teams have only
Yeah.
played twice uh, in postseason. They Niners beat the Eagles on my birthday in that wild card game back on December 29th,
86.
96 in the rain at Candlestick Park when Steve Young took a ferocious hit and cracked his ribs and in that playoff win 14-0. But what do you think about the Niners and Eagles? The Niners 2 games back, knowing if that they need a win because they're trying to keep their spot at the number 2 seed in the
Yeah.
NFC. If the season ended today, they would have that tiebreaker over Detroit for the number 2 seed. They will be playing the New Orleans Saints down in the Big Easy this weekend. So a lot's on the line.
So I definitely think this has got the makings of being a rivalry for the next 3-4 years at least. You look at the way that both rosters are set up and the young rosters, they've got some good players. The salary cap's been managed quite well between both teams. So I think for the next 3-4 seasons, there's definitely going to be a rivalry there. Now, looking at the Eagles team this year compared to last year, I don't think they're as good as what they were last year. I think defensively, they've lost a couple of key players. Obviously, one of them's gone to us, Yvonne
Hargrave.
Hargrave. Yeah. They've lost Fletcher Cox due to injury, so he's not going to be playing. And I think that's going to make a huge difference to the Eagles on Sunday night. They've got some weaknesses. They're very good at stopping the run up the middle, but as you know, the 49ers don't run up the middle very often. We always go to the outside, which is a place where the Eagles' defense is not particularly good at stopping the run. So that works in our advantage. As well as that, they're a little bit weak in the middle. And as you know, I mean, Brock Purdy hitting those intermediate passes, he's money with those passes.
West Coast
he
offense.
Is excellent.
The West Coast offense, yeah.
He is so efficient at hitting at that level. So I think it's set up to be a decent game. I think it's going to be close, but there's also part of me thinks, you know what, because of what happened last year, we're going to go into this game and we're going to absolutely batter them. My prediction on the show that I've just recorded an hour ago was a lot closer than battering them. But at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you know what, we've got the weapons. I can see a big game for Kittle over the middle. I think we're going to go run heavy first, believe it or not. I mean, that goes against what we've done the last 2-3 weeks where we've largely gone pass heavy. But I think against the Eagles, we're going to go run heavy to the outsides. And that's going to set up the intermediate passes in the middle where we're going to have the likes of Ayuk and Kittle doing crossing routes and taking advantage of the weakness in the centre there. Obviously, hopefully, they've lost a couple of DBs this season, the Eagles, so they are banged up a little bit. And then you look at their offense, and the offense, if you believe the injury report, you've got your 3 wide receivers, your running back, and your tight end all on the injury report. Yes, they're limited, so they're more than likely going to play, but you have to ask yourself, is this smoke and mirrors? Are they trying to lull us into a false sense of security that their playmakers are a little bit banged up? For me, though, on offense for the Eagles, their best position group is definitely the O-line. That O-line is an elite O-line. They've got so many good players on there. That's where the battle's going to be. It's going to be one between our defensive line and their offensive line. I think at times they're going to cancel each other out because they're so good. But I think given the fact that we brought Chase Young in a few weeks back now, and we have increased the amount of sacks that we've been getting, the amount of pressure, and Yvonne Kinlaw has finally stepped up. He's starting to have a good season. I mean, he's actually had a good season since the start of the season. And it's ironic that's a contract year and we didn't take his 5th-year option. But it could be just the fact that he's had injuries in the first 3 seasons. It's taken him a little bit of time to adjust to the speed of the NFL. But what I've seen from Yvonne Kinlaw this year, he would definitely be worth keeping. But I don't think that's going to happen because we didn't keep the 5th-year option. He will walk because he's having such a year where somebody's going to be willing to spend the money on him. Now, looking at our O-line, looking at our O-line could potentially be the weak spot in the team. So obviously the Eagles are going to be looking to take advantage of that as much as possible. And the way Shanahan generally schemes, he schemes away from his weakness. So that's exactly what I'm expecting him to do this time. I'm expecting him to protect the offensive line by calling plays that negate the pass rush coming through. Right. And what we've seen over the last few weeks in the Eagles game, if you watch their games, the highlights against the other teams they've been playing, the way those teams have been the way those teams have had success against them is by running the ball or throwing the ball directly at their defensive ends where the pass rush is coming. And because they're doing that, it completely negates their pass rush. And I can well expect Shanahan to do that again on Sunday night.
Yep. And also, when you guys recently had an event in the UK where Joe Staley was there.
That's
you guys
right.
had a watch party. Tell us more about that. When was that watch party?
So that watch party was on the 16th of October, might be the 15th. It was the game against the Browns. Joe Staley came over with his wife. He joined us in the watch party. And I mean, I can wax lyrical about how good Joe Staley is. He's so down to earth. He's one of the guys. He got excited just as much as what we did whenever we made a good play. When CMC scored earlier on, he was jumping up and down with all of us. I happened to be lucky enough to meet him on the Friday night as well. So obviously, because of what I do for the UK fan base, I closely liaise with Nick Clark. So me and Nick had gone to check out a different bar in London with some of the other team from the 49ers. And while we were there, Joe had rang Caleb, the PR guy, and asked him what everybody was doing on the night because he wanted to go out drinking. And everybody was quite tired, so they said, well, Joe, what we're going to do is just go to the rooftop bar in the hotel. So he said, that's fine with me. Yeah. So he said, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
So Caleb said, do you want to come back with us and I'll introduce you to Joe Staley? So I said, yeah, I'd love to. So I ended up drinking whiskey with Joe Staley and his wife until I think it was 1:30, 2:00 on the Saturday morning.
All right.
In their hotel. And he's such an intelligent person. He did business at school. He majored in business, but his real passion was history. One of the books that he's recently read was
I'm a historian person too.
Yeah. So you might have heard about this book. It's by Hampton Styles, and it's a history book about the gold rush, California, and how all that came about. And he was telling me about that book, and it seems really interesting. It's actually on my Christmas list now. Hopefully my wife has taken the hint and she gets me that book for Christmas.
Oh yeah, and also looking at it for this also, you was on the Faithful, that show they did several years back, narrated by the great Dwight Hicks, who was on there, won 2 rings.
So I wasn't on personally, but 4 members of the group were on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that came about, I think, 2010. I think that was all the way back in 2010.
16, yeah.
Yeah, so that was Mike Palmer, Brian Davis, Gary Rutledge, and Gavin Sutton.
Brian Davis, right?
Brian Davis.
So it's
the English Brian Davis.
It's kind of the American Brian. I'm probably now his alter ego, but I go by Professor B. I'll throw this holiday gift for you. He could be the English UK version of Professor B of the UK. He could. I give him permission, because we have the same first and last name. He can have Professor B UK as well. So if the next time I see him, you could have that, because I do have an alter ego.
Yeah, definitely a British one. A little bit smaller than you though, Brian.
Well, I'm 6'4", and then I'm about 6'4". He could be like Austin Powers mini me or something, or a clone. Yeah. But So you got you did go to the Niners Jaguars game in the UK a decade ago, right?
Yeah, back in 2013.
How was that? How was that experience?
So it was good because at the time we'd only just started doing the International Series games. So that started in 2008 with the Dolphins-Giants game, which was absolute monsoon weather. It only took 2 years before the Niners came over and they had the home game against the Broncos. That was a good game. And then 2013 against the Jags, we were still a powerhouse. It was, I think, the year before. Yeah, it was the year before Harbaugh's team started to drop off a little. So we did get to the NFC Championship game that year, and that was the time that we got beat off the Seahawks, and there was that spat between Michael Crabtree and Richard Sherman. But the actual experience itself, it was a game of inches. The experience itself was great. There were so many 49er fans there, and that's kind of how the group grew. So at events like the International Series game, we used to go around handing out business cards with all the details for the group, the Facebook address, the Twitter address, what the podcast was, and that's how we got the members in. And the group has now grown to over 3,000 members in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also, do you think the Niners will ever be making a trip to the UK to do a regular season game down the road?
Yeah, I'm expecting them to make that trip next year, because they've got the Super Bowl in a few years' time, and as part of that, they have to give up a home game, and I would expect that home game to be given up next season.
Okay, and the Niners, we would be the home team for that game.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll see what happens like I said, if they play next year at home. I would. We'll have to do a lot of, GoFundMe's, et cetera, et cetera. I would not mind making that trip out there to the UK and do a pregame tailgate show out there in the UK. Because how you like our tailgates in the US?
I love the tailgates in the US.
Really?
Yeah. So you don't get anything like that in the UK.
Well, we have our Empire Road Faithful Mile before every
That's
home
right.
game. You
Yeah.
probably know some of the regulars like Antonio Orvallo from Orvallo Productions, and and his sister is on the other side of the tailgate, the Faithful Mile. Well, Antonio's Empire Row. His sister Angelica is part of the Faithful Mile. And you see all the other tailgates, the 408 chapter from
Yeah.
Santa Clara and San Jose. They're great. Trey Bracewell and her husband Chuck, they give me great hospitality. A lot of the vendors are out there, small businesses supporting the team. And this is something I give you a tip for all the UK. Anytime the 49ers or a team comes in for the UK playing a UK game, you always want to, if you want to help if you have a small business, please support your small business for our people in the UK as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to a pre-tailgate on last Thursday. So it was the Seahawks, and I hadn't realised it was actually organised by the Niner Empire.
Yes,
So I had
Niner
reached out
Empire.
to the Seattle faithful and asked them what bars are open early or on Thanksgiving morning where we can go to where there's going to be 49er fans. So they told us about Kel's Bar. And as we turned up, it was absolutely chocker full of 49er fans. And it was actually an event run by the Niner Empire. So we've got our photos taken. They've actually published them, I think, this morning or overnight. So you can see the photos with our flag and everything. So we're in there from, I think, about 10:30, 11:15 in the morning till 1:30, which is when we set off to go to the 49er Rush Road Trip tailgate. And that was just one block down from Lumen Field at the box. And that's the one that was run by John Chapman, Wayne Breezy. So we
Right.
went down there and we tailgated with them before we headed off to Lumen. And it was an experience, Lumen Field. It wasn't as cold as I was expecting, so I went well dressed up, plenty of layers on, and I was
Yeah.
quite comfortable, to be honest, during the game. And to be honest, I also thought that I was going to get a lot more stick from Seattle Seahawks fans, but they were very nice.
Wow.
Every Seattle Seahawks fan I talked to, they were very nice, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. The only bad Seahawk fan we crossed path with was when we were going into the stadium, and it was an obnoxious woman who decided to push past everyone, and she wasn't just being obnoxious to 49er fans, she was being obnoxious to Seahawks fans as well. And she was screaming at the top of her voice, "I have a seat ticket, you have to move out of my way and let me through." To which one of our members turned around and said, "Love, we've all got seat tickets, just hold yourself back there, will you?" And she
Well,
wasn't too impressed with that. But
yeah.
yeah, I was quite surprised with Seattle. It's a small city, much smaller than San Francisco. I actually ran round it on the Wednesday morning, just to take in the sights. Went down to Lumen, T-Mobile Park, all the way down the front, the piers, up to the Space Needle, round Memorial Stadium where Washington plays, round Climate Pledge Arena where the Kraken play as well, and then back through the centre of the city. So it's quite small, a lot different to San Francisco, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then also you also gotta look at also but do you also if the Niners do get to the Super Bowl, you will have a Super Bowl party in the UK.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, we'll have a Super Bowl party.
3:30
I
Pacific
actually think
Standard.
that
Right.
I think that'll be organised by the 49ers. So that was the plan last year. Had we get into the Super Bowl, there'd been an event held at Elland Road, which is where Leeds United play. And the details of that event seemed quite interesting. So we're going to try and do an authentic tailgate
Nice.
for the fans that went there. So yeah, if we get the Super Bowl, I'm definitely expecting some sort of official 49ers watch party in the UK. Whether or not I'll be at that watch party or in Las Vegas is another question.
Yeah,
Because
we're
if
trying to
if we
get
get
down
to
to
the Super
Vegas
Bowl,
as well though
yeah,
too. We're trying to get
yeah,
down
if
to
we get
Vegas as
there
well too.
and it's cost effective, I wouldn't mind going to Vegas and sitting in one of the bars there, because I know there's no way I can afford a ticket.
Oh,
The
no
tickets
way.
the last couple of years have been $5,000-6,000 for a ticket, and the
Well,
prices
you could
don't
you
drop.
could you could rent a house down there for a week, and that's the equivalent. Go figure. I
Yeah,
mean, they
yeah,
they
it's ridiculous prices.
it's ridiculous. I mean, if I've ever, that's the I say I would just want to be there just to. if when the Niners win the Super Bowl, one of these Super Bowls, or when it happens, just capture the video, the moment
Yeah,
of the fans cheering and all of that, and then if you're very lucky to run into a, and I'm not promoting it or anything, if you go to one of their post game after party or with the team, just to talk to them about how does it feel to be a champion, get some behind the scenes, some good stuff. But
yeah,
yeah, but the you know yeah 3:30 our time, and then not to, and then the game would start there in the UK around 11:30
that's
UK
right.
time. So meaning
Yeah,
you guys will be up till about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning when the game is
yeah. I
concluded.
mean, that's not too bad because generally on a primetime game, it doesn't start until 20 past 1 in the morning. So the Seattle Seahawks game last week, obviously it was a 20 past 5 game. Over in the UK, that wouldn't have started until 20 past 1 Friday morning, and you wouldn't have gotten to bed until maybe 5, half 5 in the morning,
And
and then you'd
everybody's
have to
off
be up
that
again at
weekend too.
7.
Yeah, it was a four
Well, no,
day
because
weekend.
well, not over in the UK, not over
Really?
in the UK. Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously we don't celebrate Thanksgiving. It's an American holiday.
Well,
So on the Friday morning, you'd go to bed at 5, half 5 in the morning. You'd have to get back out of bed at 7 o'clock and go to work.
well, if I was living in the if I was living in the UK, I'm going by the US clock. Well, the
Yeah,
people in
it would
Canada,
help.
they celebrate they'll celebrate Thanksgiving in mid October, right during the baseball playoffs and the league championship series, or before the
Right?
even the World Series. It's like the national past Thanksgiving and a national pastime for Canada, and the gridiron in the U.S. for Thanksgiving. Very factoid, interesting.
Yeah. So while I say the UK doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving, I can guarantee you pretty much any NFL fan does something on Thanksgiving. They
Yes,
will celebrate in some sort of way because it's the whole Americana thing. That's kind of that's one of the attractive things about the NFL as well. A lot of people like the way that America does certain things. So yeah, there's a lot of fans who would celebrate in some way, some shape or form. And last Thursday in Seattle was the very first time I'd ever tasted yams, and it's left us speechless. They were unbelievable,
hmm
and I wish they had them over in the UK.
yeah. Do you have plans to come back out here to the Bay Area next year to check out some more Niner games, or down
Yeah,
the road?
so I'm intending to get back every year, even if it's just for one weekend to fly in on the Friday and fly back out on the Monday, just so I can see one game a year. Obviously, doing it that way keeps it cheap. However, what I think will end up happening is we'll get another tailgate game, or at least we'll apply to get another tailgate. Not a tailgate, gold mine. We'll apply to get another gold mine game, which means potentially another 40 of us will be coming over. I kind of made the decision while I was over in San Francisco that the Bucks game was going to be my last gold mine game. So I will help organise it, get everybody across there, but I will just get myself a normal general admission ticket and I'll go tailgating before, because one of the restrictions for the coal mine is you have to be in the stadium at 10 o'clock in the morning, so you don't get to go tailgating. And that's one of the things I miss, because I've got a lot of friends over in California now, a lot of
Right.
friends who tailgate down in Blue Lot 1. So I think next season, definitely, I will help organise the gold mine trip, but I will be going tailgating down in Blue Lot 1. So
I
somebody can
think
have my
yeah,
spot in the gold
yeah.
mine.
Yeah, because that takes a full that this for this it takes a year round planning to plan this trip
It
around.
does. Yeah.
It takes a lot of work though, so that's why when the schedules come out next spring, because the Niners will next year will get the NFC. I'm trying to thinking, they get the NFC North and they get the AFC East next year. Then they get the one
Yeah.
NFC East game, depending where you finish in the standings, and all intents and purposes, assuming the Niners will play the Eagles again next year, and this time I think the games will be coming out here for a regular season game next year, and then they get that extra AFC West opponent, depending who they have in the stand where they finish in the standings. But Yeah, yeah, this is a, yeah. I mean, this is just a that's a fun thing to do, and you do have a podcast, right, Lee?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What
Like
do
I
you?
said, I'd literally just finished recording the podcast at 9:10. So what time would that be? 1:10 for you. I finished recording the podcast. I was on editing the podcast just before that we started to go live. Almost finished. I just needed to listen through it again before I publish that. And that's published on Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher,
Right.
anywhere that has an aggregated podcast, you can get us. And it's the 49er Faithful UK show. And it's easy to spot. It's a UK flag, but it's in red and gold.
I definitely want to be on your podcast though. To me, born and raised kid here in San Francisco, and give my perspective though, because I am born and raised here. This is where I've
Yeah,
been
yeah,
living all my
yeah,
life though. So and I graduated high school at George Washington High School. You know that high school out there in the outer Richmond district. If it's the best stadium, I might even have to text you a picture.
yeah.
You see the background of the Golden Gate Bridge. That's the high school I went to, George Washington High School,
Right.
and I played baseball there, and I was part of the support staff for football in the '90s. I came back recently to to do pregame music entertainment for the high school football, and we're going to be in the off season doing some planning, helping them out, be like an ambassador consultant to better the quality game day experience for next fall season. So that's going to give us some time in this off season. But I will text you that photo of the high school field with the you can see the backdrop of the Golden Gate Bridge. A lot of people I've run into friends, people who've never went to Washington, they just love that stadium. If you're ever in town when George Washington Eagles ever playing a football game up in the over at Eagle Stadium, you should check that out. You should check it out. I would be doing PA or be doing the music. You will have a blast. It's funny. You listen to Greg Papa's Touchdown San Francisco, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Play by play. Well, we found that video. We found that video, or we found it the video, or found the foghorn. We found that foghorn piece uh, a while back, and I talked to one of the parents, and I said we got the perfect touchdown score, uh, the perfect touchdown score, and I said, hey, we're going to do it this football season because it's perfect backdrop. You can it's a perfect backdrop because San Francisco, the Bay, and Washington Eagles colors. They are scarlet and gray, red and gray. They almost the uniforms we had back in the day when I was in high school almost resemble the 49ers, and we had a great principal, Mr. Vidal, Al Vidal, who passed away recently. He was like he cared about high school sports and student athletes. He was he was like to George Washington High School sports like Eddie DeBarlo was to the 49ers, how it was family oriented and first
yeah.
class. What are your thoughts about Eddie DeBarlo?
I mean, Eddie was the main reason that we won so many Super Bowls in the 80s. Obviously, he did something a little bit daft during the 90s, which he got caught out for. And I think because of that, it did taint people's impression of Eddie purely because we were lumbered with the Yorks. That's how everybody felt during the mid to late 90s when it all kicked off. But I think as things have gone on, so I'm a big supporter of Jed York. I think he's doing a really good job. I know why people don't like him. I know the move from Candlestick down to Santa Clara, the blame on Jed York. However, it was already signed before he even took over running the football
Well,
team.
well,
It
that
was already
was
signed by
right,
Denise and John. Yeah,
right.
that signed. So all he did was oversee the move. He wasn't the one that said, right, we're moving down there. It was signed off by John and Denise. But he gets a lot of the flack for that. And then obviously there was the Harbaugh years where he brought in Harbaugh. He did such a good job. But then he kind of let Trent Baalke twist his arm and you got rid of
Yeah.
the wrong person. It should have been Balky that we got rid of, not Harbour.
Right.
But as it turns out, I think ultimately that's probably the right decision as well, because the way things have gone, we had a few really bad years. I mean, Jim Tom
Yeah.
Sula was never a head coach.
No.
Chip Kelly was an
One
absolute
and
car
done.
crash.
No. No.
But then we've ended up with Shanahan and Lynch. And Jed York actually turned around and said, look, I'm going to step back from the football side of that. I'm just going to run the business. I let them do whatever they need to do. And he's kept that promise. He's done that. And he's grown. People seem to forget that. The position
Right.
he was put in at that age, he was always going to struggle until he had the experience of how to run the team.
He
And
was a
that's why he used
rookie.
to reach out to his Uncle Eddie and say, what am I doing wrong here? And he's learned from that experience. So you can't just keep on going back to the mistakes he made.
No, no,
You
you
have to have
can't.
a look at how he's
Right,
overcome
right.
those
In
mistakes.
perspective, overcome those
Yeah,
mistakes. Just
that's
like
right.
I mean, in perspective, like 20 years ago when they fired Steve Mariucci, when John York ran Steve
Yeah, yeah,
Mariucci out, and a lot of people felt, yes, Mooch was conservative in some of his questionable play calling, but once Mooch left, you knew Jeff
yeah.
Gar. It
It
was
was
the end
just
of the line for both
downhill.
downhill rapidly. Jeff Garcia,
Yeah,
To, two faces of that franchise. It really in 2000. We're going back into perspective when Bill
yeah,
Walsh took over that club, when they had to part ways with Jerry Rice, which was yours truly was at the last ever game. Jerry Rice in person was December of 2000, 23 years ago, right before my 24th birthday, was there at Candlestick when Terrell Owens had caught over 20 balls for over 200 plus yards, averaged about 20 yards per catch, which was the changing of the guard, which was Jerry when
yeah,
Jerry got that victory ride for the last time. It was kind of like the end of my my like as a young adult, my that childhood of me of all those Niner teams of the '80s. Jerry Rice was leaving the Niners because of the salary cap issues. Prior to that, you had Joe Montana and Ronnie Lott, two main cognates of the Niners dynasty of winning the four Super Bowls in the 1980s, was inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Then Steve Young in the spring retired because he had another concussion. That
yeah.
team was going through a transition in 2000. Plus, they were against the salary cap. Then you bring in 2003. They bring in Dennis Erickson after York
Yeah.
dismissed Mariucci, and then things just went bad with Dennis Erickson, Mike Nolan, Dick no
Mike
the
Single.
son
Yeah, Mike
the son
Singletree.
well, the son, his father, of course, the late Dick Nolan coached those
Yeah,
Niner teams with John Brody and Gene Washington, those early 70s teams. And then Mike Singletary was there, then Harbaugh, then, things really fell apart after that, after the NFC Championship. And just, they parted ways after that. Then it was Tom Sula. Then it was Chip Kelly. Then you look at the present, where they were then, where they are now. So, you know, they're going to be contenders, and there going to be some years they're not going to win it, but they're going to always be contending for a title. I think with both Kyle and John in
exactly.
charge, and and I think I'll never forget 4 years ago, as we're in this holiday season, putting in perspective when the Niners came back and won that game against the Saints in that thriller, and
Yeah,
Niner fans took over down there in the Big Easy. I'll never forget Dr. John York after that win. You know the story. Jed York lost his little brother to a horrible, tragic suicide. The
yeah,
Yorks, they were in there. Dr. John York spoke after the game, and all the stuff we criticized him. He was no good, this and that, etc. Sell the team, whatever. He got so emotional because he lost one of his kids when they came back and beat the Seed. It finally came to the conclusion that we could finally that the put that to rest with John York, because I think
yeah,
the whole family has changed into a new leaf, and
yeah. Definitely.
John York on the sidelines giving pins out to Niner fans. So he had to take. I never one time remembering. I ran into Roger Craig at Momo's right across the street from Oracle Park. When the Niners were going to look like they're going to be rebuilding, he said, hey, he's going to figure this thing out. And it took some time.
Yeah,
Took
it
some
did,
time. Even one
but he's
time,
done it.
Jeremy Newberry on after a Niner post-game show on KPIX CBS 5, Channel 5 in the Bay Area. He was doing the post-game with Dennis O'Donnell, said, he did a good job of building the stadium and all that, but he needed to focus in on the business side, not getting involved with the football operations. And it was, and I credit Dr. John York and his wife, or Eddie DeBarlo's sister, of course, Denise, of picking out who wants to run the team, getting the right people in.
Yeah.
So Lee, that's going to do it for now. We got a good 1 hour of just main course of fish and chips of 49er football. And, we thank you for being on. I definitely want to
No
set up a
problem.
time to come on your podcast on a later date.
Yeah.
And before we take off, I want this clip by Greg Papa. I queued it up for you. Hold on.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. I hope it comes through if you can hear it.
I'm not hearing anything at the moment.
I love it.
Yeah, can't hear.
You can't hear it?
No.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to get a new sound system board. Yeah, that's kind of the foghorn part is the one that they usually they do every time the Niners scores a touchdown.
Yeah.
But that's what we did for our high school game. We're trying to live up revise the game day experience. But Lee, it's nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Brian.
You're always free to come. Welcome to come on the show anytime. Hopefully I'd like to come on and one of your podcasts one day when I get a chance.
Yeah, we'll get it sorted.
Hope we catch up with you around the playoffs or down the road. And what's if you want to listen to your podcast, where the Niner fans listen to you at?
Yeah. It's at 49er Faithful UK. That is what you call the show.
Right.
And you can download it via iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and a few other different places. iTunes is obviously the most popular one.
Right. Yeah, Lee. Hey, I'm glad you enjoy being on our show today. I wish you, the rest of the boys back there in the UK, and the Niner faithful back there, wish you guys a very happy holiday season, and go Niners.
Bang, bang, Niner gang.
All right. That's Lee Gowland, the head guy for the 49er UK. Check him out. Check all their podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. 49ers take on the Philadelphia Eagles. Kickoff time is at 1:25 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in the Bay Area. It's the National League game on Fox Sports. Calling the game for Fox Sports will be Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olson, along with Tom Rinaldi and Aaron Andrews will give you the sideline reporting duties. And on the U.S. Bank 49ers radio network, KBR 680 104.5 FM, with Greg Papa and Tim Ryan with the call. For the latest news on 49ers news and so much more, go to 49ers.com and check us out on youtube.com/@NinersRadio49. Thank you for watching this presentation of Niners Radio 49. Thanks with my guest, Lee Gowland from the 49ers UK chapter. Check him out again at 49er Faithful UK. He also have a page on Facebook. Hope you enjoy. Check him out. Thank you for watching this presentation of the 49er podcast on Niners Radio 49 in association with Satellite Digital Media News Network, where every team has a fan, every fan has a voice, the network home of champions. Thank you for watching, everybody, and go Niners!
Go Niners!